That became kind of a moment where we really see how American leadership and economic might could have a tremendous impact on the trajectory of the world, and in this sense, for good. Going into World War II, there wasn't a lot of unity necessarily in the United States over entering the war. Coming out of sort of a period of greater isolationism, when the war starts up, there's actually a pretty vibrant sort of movement called the America First movement that's really kind of promoting this idea of keeping us out of this conflict that was brewing in Europe.
Kind of connecting the dots of fixing the problem of unemployment along with wanting to stop the spread of fascist dictatorships that we started to see emerging in not just Europe, but in the Pacific. President Franklin Roosevelt argued that the U.S. could help defeat fascist dictatorships, collectively known as the Axis powers, by supplying weapons, vehicles, food, other materials to allied nations such as Great Britain.
One big step for that, I often refer to my students as sort of the economic declaration of war, was the Lend-Lease Act. Franklin Roosevelt referred to sort of this idea of creating the arsenal of democracy. And the idea would be that we were not going to get directly involved in the fighting, but that we were going to supply the Allied forces. And at that time, particularly, the eye was on Britain, which was, at this point, getting prepped for a potential invasion by Germany. And the idea of sending as much aid as possible to maintain and enable Britain to defend itself. The drain on resources for a country like Britain, which was, its industrial capacity was tapped out. They just don't have the capacity. They don't have the ships, they don't have the planes, and they don't have the armaments to defend themselves.
So instead of immediately sending large numbers of soldiers overseas, the United States would use its enormous industrial capacity to produce the equipment needed to fight the war. American factories were capable of producing military equipment on a scale that no other country could match at that point. We built ships, airplanes, tanks, trunks, weapons, ammunition, steel, and machinery faster than any Axis power could really destroy them. So the steady flow of supplies allowed allied nations to continue to fight.
Contextually, Cleveland and the United States were coming out of the Great Depression.
At that point, the United States was in the midst of recovering and in the process of coming up with solutions to deal with its own economic depression.
25% of the country's unemployed. The unemployment rate in Cleveland with our industrial economy was about 50%.
And Cleveland happened to be already one of the country's largest manufacturing cities at the time, so it made it an important part of the effort before the U.S. even entered the war.
As wartime production ramps up, it just absolutely moves the country to essentially what becomes full employment. In Cleveland, our unemployment rate is going to plummet. We're going to see, industrial jobs increasing by over a third. We had about 190,000 people employed in industrial occupations. Towards the end of the war, that's going to be over 340,000.
Cleveland's steel mills, machine shops, industrial plants contributed directly to this production. Northeast Ohio, our companies already had been manufacturing steel, engine parts, bearings, electrical equipment, precision tools that were then shipped across the country and around the world. Factories operated around the clock, and thousands of workers, including women, joined in the industrial workforce. Even our location in Northeast Ohio, being on the Great Lakes and river, and also having an extensive railroad network, made it a great and ideal transportation center to move all these supplies around. The city's population and economy grew as people moved to Northeast Ohio seeking wartime jobs.
Cleveland's African American population, for instance, skyrockets during this time. It goes up by about 75%. And the idea here was, again, with these industrial jobs, there were a lot of opportunities for groups that had previously not perhaps kind of had access to those good paying jobs. And so the defense industries became a place where African Americans could find employment. And so we start to see this, continuation of migration from the South up to northern industrial cities like Cleveland, Detroit, Pittsburgh.
Many of the women that entered the workforce for the first time took industrial jobs, although at lower wages, while men served in the military. And iconically, the image of Rosie the Riveter became a symbol of women's contributions during the war effort. Additionally, a major migration of workers from Puerto Rico came to industrial cities. particularly Lorain and Cleveland in Northeast Ohio, to work in the steel industry.
We just see our economy go from this devastated industrial economy to this thriving industrial economy really in a very short period of time.
After World War II, the United States experienced one of the greatest periods of economic growth in our history.
We left with our economy not only intact, but thriving. And so the United States was in a position economically to exert more influence.
Unlike after World War I, the United States did not withdraw from world affairs after World War II. Instead, it became a global leader. Unfortunately, at the same time, tensions with the Soviet Union will lead to the Cold War, making continued industrial strength important for our national defense. Factories shifted from military production to consumer production, such as automobiles, appliances, construction materials. World War II showed that economic strength can be just as important as military strength. The ability to manufacture supplies, trade with allies, and support friendly nations remains a key part of American foreign policy today.
There's just this change in outlook. The United States is now emerging economically and diplomatically as kind of a global superpower. We actually helped found the United Nations, and we get involved with the Marshall Plan, where we're going to send aid to Europe. We, have agreements on global trade that happen. And so the United States is sort of imagining a new world order, which it's certainly at the center of, in which trade, alliances, and support are going to provide security.
Strong industries and reliable supply chains are still viewed as essential to national security.
One of the lessons that came out of World War II was that you couldn't rely on the sort of oceans, right? The Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, to separate us from the problems that were happening in Europe or in other parts of the world, as they had perhaps in the past. The world was getting, in some sense, smaller. And so that almost duty to leadership, right? That we had a duty to get involved, not only for our own benefit, but to preserve democratic nations that were under threat. And that, was an impulse that drove the United States, I would say, through the 1950s, up into modern times.